Chris Hall here on Dawgs on Demand on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and all the other places that you can find our podcast and all of our programming. And it's good to have these guys with us today on our program. Ryan Reynolds? No, he says it's Robert Reynolds. But you can't hardly tell the two apart. Kobe Pierce and Juan Daniels. And good to have you guys. Pierce, right? Is that right? Got it right. Okay. Now, these guys are with the DGD podcast, and they love University of Georgia football, and they love talking about the Bulldogs. And so we thought we'd have them on the program. We just sit around and talk a little bit about football, like you're sitting around in your living room, with a cup of coffee or whatever it might be, and ragging on each other about UGA. Well, tell me about the DGD podcast, and how long have you guys been in business? Robert, how about that?
So we started peak COVID. It's kind of just something that stemmed from something I was doing before, where I was just talking to myself kind of in a Facebook group, and it kind of just materialized into a podcast. Juan came on shortly after, kind of growing that way, and then we brought on Kobe as well. It was one of these things where just kind of organically worked together, and just obviously having just a fan's perspective, former players' perspectives, right? Kind of bring that the whole, I guess you could say, the whole feel around it. So, just kind of doing the show every Monday, Wednesday now, and just continuing to push forward and talking Georgia football.
Hey, a lot of fun. Now, Juan, you played for the University of Georgia, of course, and
yes,
give us a little bit. Give us a little bit about your UGA background, your years at the University of Georgia.
Yeah, so I played. Coach Breakoff was my head coach. And then my senior year ended up being Coach Donnan. So I played with the likes of Bobo. I played with Kirby, Hines Ward. So I was there with that group, Terrell Davis. And unfortunately for me, but it's great for the University of Georgia, I was in the top 10. But this year, Brock Bowers is going to knock me out of the top 10, put me to 11. But then there's also going to be Lad McConkey, who's going to come in there and put me at number 12. So, which was my number in college. So I can't complain. Anytime that, you've got, great guys doing great things, for the University of Georgia, is going to be something big. So I'm excited for this year.
Hey, if those two guys are going to knock you down the list, that's okay. That's pretty good company, brother. Yeah.
And I love that the fact that they're blue collar guys. They work hard, and they are everything that the University of Georgia stands for. So what, better pair than to knock me out of the top 10 than those two right there.
How about it, Kobe? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I played under Kirby Smart from 2016 until 2020. My last game was the Sugar Bowl that we won versus Baylor. So I was a walk-on long snapper. Didn't really play a lot, any of that, but just have been up here in Athens. I worked for the football team for a little while after I got done. Then I worked for the university this past year, and now I'm still currently working for the university now. So just up here in Athens. My wife, met her. She played soccer here. She's in med school up here. So we're just really immersed in athletics, a lot of friends, a lot of, people up here that we still hang out with, go to a lot of sporting events, just really kind of live and breathe Athens air all the time. So definitely fun to talk about football with guys that know what they're talking about and, can see it from a different perspective.
Hey, we love long snappers. You got to have them. You love long snappers.
Special teams matters is what we always say.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. Well, it's good to have you guys on our program today. So, we'll just go around the horn here now. Okay. Back-to-back national champions. I mean, seriously, who would have ever thought something like that, 2 years ago for the University of Georgia? I remember the day when we won the first national championship back in 1980. I watched that ball game with Herschel Walker and the crew, and boy, it was a long drought between then and the national championship a couple of years ago, then the repeat. So Georgia back-to-back national champions. Amazing run. These are the good old days. These are the glory days. But now we're on the brink of a new season, and Georgia is loaded again. I was speaking with Jeff Sentinel from AJC and Dog Nation, and Man, he was rattling off what Georgia has stacked up now and for next year. Is it possible that Georgia can win another national championship? How possible is a three-peat? What do you think, Juan? How possible is a three-peat?
It is very possible. You can ask Robert. I predicted our first national championship. I predicted our back-to-back national championships, and I'm predicting that third national championship. We are absolutely loaded defensively. We're absolutely loaded offensively. And if you could tell by the spring game, Carson Beck came in there and he played lights out. So he's going to have the reins. I just think it's kind of a plug and play situation with the quarterbacks. I think all three of those quarterbacks can go in there and perform very well. But our depth and just the swagger that we have. And Kirby said it. He just said, hey, we are not going to be hunted at the University of Georgia. We're going to do the hunting. And when I tell you that's something that's very, very scary, that's very scary. So look for us to be talking a year from now, talking about, wow, are we going to go for a fourth?
I mean, it boggles the mind. You know, I've been a Georgia fan for so long. And, you expect, 7, 8 win season, 9 win season. Boy, that's a great season. We'll go to the Citrus Bowl or something. And then, boom, there you are. And you take out Alabama and you win the national championship with that amazing game last year against TCU in the championship game. Just an amazing game. So, Kobe, you think Georgia's poised, ready now for a back-to-back national championships?
Yeah, it's definitely been a topic of conversation on the show a couple times. I think you stay healthy. You don't get in your own way. You let your chips fall in the SEC championship. Right now, I'm feeling like it's going to be LSU. You may see again in the SEC championship. I think they're the most complete team outside of us in the SEC. And then I think really your big hurdle, if you get past them, is Michigan. They've been kind of building. 2 years ago, they run into us in their first playoffs. I think they're happy and content. They beat Ohio State. They've, made a playoff for the first time. I think last year they kind of got in their own way, got let down in a big way, kind of, handing the game to TCU in a way. And I really think with J.J. McCarthy's junior year, Blake Corum's coming back, I think Michigan really could be, one of the top 2 teams all year this year. And so I could really see it being us and Michigan in a slugfest for the three-peat or for, their first title in a long time. But I think right now, it's easy to predict that here in the preseason. Nobody's been injured. Nobody's been hurt. Nobody's done anything like that. But, right now I could see a very easy route with the schedule, with the way the SEC West is, that you could see yourself being the 1 seed, playing in the Natty, give yourself a good chance to three-peat.
Yeah, it's just amazing to think about all of that, as a reality perhaps for Georgia. Robert, I noticed that the University of Michigan in their practices now have incorporated a beat Georgia segment. They've got that beat Ohio State segment in their practices. Now they've incorporated that beat Georgia segment. What do you think about that? And what, as you think about it, what would that consist of? Because they can't replicate what Georgia does. What do you think?
Well, I feel like it's kind of see both sides where you see it's a compliment to Georgia, right? When you have going back to back, you assert a level of physicality, different, all these different traits that a lot of people aspire to have. And I think that might be what that could be pertaining to, finding a way to, right, like go good on good, or just finding a way to get more physical. Because when you look at Michigan, right, when they played Georgia, they just got outmatched physically. You sit there, you look at the game against TCU, they just weren't themselves, right? Like they didn't stick to their brand of football. And, do I approve of it? Kind of yes and no. I feel like you should focus on being yourself and bettering yourself rather than trying to beat someone, if you will. Ultimately, though, people are going to do what they're going to do. If we're the standard now for that, then so be it. I'll gladly take the compliment. But, kind of what Kobe says, right? You got so much returning talent there at Michigan. Yeah. You just got to find a way to be more physical and assert your brand, right? Especially when you get to the playoffs, if you get there.
Yeah. Now, just looking back, we're going to look back just for a moment. Stetson Bennett. What an amazing 2 years that Stetson Bennett had. First of all, he comes in and nobody wants him. Even the fans in the stands say, "Oh no, we got Stetson on the field." And then he has that amazing run, leads Georgia to that first national championship. Still doubters in the stands, among the fans for the next year. Stetson Bennett, really, is it possible that he can lead us to another national championship? And he does. Just one, when you think about the Stetson Bennett story, the walk on, the leaving, the coming back, and coming from way back in the depth chart to doing what he did, it really is. It's a movie-like story, don't you think? There's going to be a Stetson Bennett movie because somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime look at Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner, went through the ringer only to become a Super Bowl champion. So the thing that I liked about Stetson that first year was just the humility part. You come in, you're a walk-on, you go somewhere else to better yourself and then come back to lead this team. I loved that about him. The second year, I was not as much as a big-time Stetson Bennett fan when he dropped the bombs when he was at LSU, because I was thinking, always remember where you came from. And I think that that's something that Kirby teaches. That's something that I learned at Georgia, that no matter what, this is who I'm representing. I'll always remember that part. I think he kind of lost that a little bit, but then you bring home another national championship. I think that's a lot to Kirby. In that after that Ohio State game, Kirby humbled him, and then you saw a different Stetson Bennett in that national championship game. And I think that once you believe in your program, follow your program, and understand who you are, that's what I liked about Stetson Bennett in that national championship game.
Yeah, and I think a part of that attitude that Stetson developed, I think, was just a chip on his shoulder. He'd been so dissed, and and he started saying, "Okay, guys, I'm going to show you," and it kind of came out a little bit. Kobe, it looks like Carson Beck now is going to be the starting quarterback for the University of Georgia. Hey, look at the quarterback room for Georgia. Brock Vandergriff, Gunnar Stockton, will be behind Carson Beck apparently. And then you got Dylan Raiola coming in, Ryan Puglisi coming in. For this year, the quarterback room looks pretty good. But, man, for the next couple of years, wow. And somebody in there somewhere has got to be thinking about, I'm going to the portal. Wow. What do you think about Carson Beck and the future of the quarterback at the University of Georgia?
Yeah. We've joked about it that your schedule this year especially is friendly early on to the fact that you have a new quarterback, possibly two quarterbacks that you need to get some live fire repetitions. I mean, you open with two very, hate to just call them super cupcakey games, but low pressure situations where you can run Carson out there and let him run the ones offense the whole first half. And then at that point, you can bring him in the third quarter and let him run situational type football where you're going to say, hey, we need this type of route ran. And, we're going to put you in a situation where, we need first downs in 3 plays and different things. But then I could also see bringing in Brock Vandergriff for a whole fourth quarter or maybe a whole second half in one of those games to just get him, used to being out there in not hand the ball off moments. Because at some point, I think that was the nice thing about last year, especially, is, in some of those early games, Stet's coming out at halftime, maybe the end of the third quarter. You're letting Carson Beck get some reps. You just don't want a Jacob Eason situation 2017 to have you jog out a quarterback who's never taken a full rep, under fire before. I think Kirby's done a really good job of that, not only in the quarterback room. We've talked about it. The most impressive has been the offensive line room. Yeah. And we rotated 7-8 offensive linemen regularly last season to prepare people to be ready to play every day this season. I mean, it's mattered. As far as looking forward to the quarterback room, it'll just depend the year Carson has. If he can be one and done, which is very difficult to do, obviously, then I don't necessarily see anybody hitting the portal super soon. But if Carson returns for a second year then I think that's where it gets a little more dicey.
Yeah, it's a pretty good problem to have. All these quarterbacks coming in for Georgia that are certainly high quality quarterbacks. And as far as the quarterback position is concerned, Georgia's been relatively injury free for the last 2 or 3 seasons. And you got to think somewhere down the line, one of those guys, you maybe, and we don't hope it doesn't happen, certainly, but you could have an injury that could be out for a couple of games. And so, you need a good, sturdy, strong backup, obviously, in the quarterback room. Listen, Robert, Georgia, I was raised on a farm, and we would gather watermelons, and down in South Georgia, we'd gather watermelons, and you'd do clippings. You do the first clipping, of the field, and it would produce pretty good. And then you do another clipping, and it just kept producing, and the field would keep producing, and until finally it gave out. Here's Georgia again. They just keep producing these recruiting classes, and the offensive line recruits that Georgia picked up this past week. My word, these are some massive human beings that are coming to the University of Georgia. Robert, how does Georgia do that? How does Georgia continue to maintain the level of recruiting that Georgia has been able to do? Is it one thing? Is it a combination of things? And I wonder how frustrating it is for other schools in the SEC to see Georgia just continue to recruit the way Georgia recruits. What do you think, Robert?
Well, first, I think it's a multitude of things. I think it starts with the coaching staff as a whole, the relentless approach to recruiting. I mean, if you go back to Sam Pittman when he left for the Arkansas job, it was interesting to hear his comments about how Kirby showed him that recruiting on a different level. It's not what everybody thinks it is when you're under Kirby Smart. So the relentless approach is one thing. I think also, listen, the fact that you've got new things, called national championships, right? Those help. You look at the NFL draft success, right? Like there's a fun fact that, under like any linebacker, basically from Coach Lanning to, Coach Schumann now, if you played a start and snap, you're on an NFL roster actively. That's just absurd. So you look at different positions, right? Obviously, you're familiar with linebackers, but recently looking at offensive linemen and defensive linemen, it's interesting to see before, Coach Scott, D-line, what really wasn't a big thing in regards to NFL draft success. Now you're sitting there pushing out multiple guys, a class, right? In each draft, you're pushing out 2-3 guys. Offensive line, kind of same thing. So I feel like under Kirby Smart, just every position is just exponentially just blossomed. And to your point, if you're an SEC opponent, first off, I don't care how you feel. Second off, just get better, right? I mean, you look at Georgia spends more than anyone. So it's just a multitude of things. But obviously the NFL success, the on-field success, right? Back-to-back national champions for a reason. And then you look at, kind of what Juan was talking about and the recruiting class for depth and things like that, right? You don't have a chance to three-peat if you don't sustain the recruiting. It starts with recruiting, whether it be high school or the portal nowadays. And Kirby's done an excellent job, and the whole staff has done an excellent job to sustain that and elevate it, strangely enough.
Yeah. And, last year there was some chirping coming over from a state adjacent to us about, hey, we should be in the playoffs and all of that kind of thing. And my response to that was, win the games. If you want to be in the playoffs, win your games. And, don't lose to Tennessee and don't lose to LSU. Win your games and you get in. So, but, nobody listened to me, but that's what I think. Win your games. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's coming up. Who do you think is going to be the biggest rival for Georgia in the SEC East? Who's going to – I would think maybe Tennessee, but you never know. South Carolina looks decent. Who do you think?
Yeah, I'm going South Carolina. South Carolina, they have, a great quarterback coming back. They've got a great running game. They are building. Shane Beamer is doing something great over there. Obviously, that's, that whole coaching philosophy coming down from his dad. Special teams is big for them, but they are really, really making a push. They have got them, they've just gotten some really great recruits in there. And their whole thing is beat Georgia. beat Georgia. We've got a tough game at Tennessee. I think that they are going to compete, but as far as, just being a huge rival for Georgia, I just don't necessarily see it. I think they've got some great recruits, but Shane Beamer's just doing something special over there, and I think that that's probably going to be our biggest competition in the SEC East.
I love Shane Beamer. I just love his attitude, and I never will forget, they in the post-game interview and after Georgia beat South Carolina, and they asked him, well, what was going on? And he said, those 5-star recruits, that's what's going on. Georgia had. His honesty was just so refreshing. Kobe, you mentioned now LSU and the SEC West. Who do you think over on the other side of the SEC pond coming out of the West? I like Arkansas. I don't think they're going to win the West, but I think they're a pretty good team. What do you think about the SEC West?
Yeah, I want to just quick thing on what Juan said too about South Carolina. I really feel like it's where they are in the schedule compared to Tennessee as well. Very early on, very unsure of our quarterback play, and compared to how they ended last season, very sure of the team they have. If you were to flip flop them in Tennessee, I would say the answer would be the other way. Tennessee's issue is they just play us so far down the road.
Yeah.
But for the West, I always am going to love the pit boss. We do a pick 'em every week. I've rode with the pit boss in some games that I probably shouldn't have last year, but I'm a ride with him. He's my man. I love Sam Pittman. He's a great guy, one of the best coaches in all of college football. But they're gonna have to make a big turnaround defensively before I go picking them to win the West or anything. I think they were one of the bottom 5 teams in pass defense last year. I just think LSU, as of right now, has the quarterback question answered. They have the defensive question answered. They have a lot of things that I just don't know that are answered in Tuscaloosa as we sit today.
Yeah.
I think they have some questions on who's going to be running that offense. They have some questions on who's going to be running the ball, who's going to be catching the ball. How is a new OC going to fare? How's a new DC going to fare? I really think that the LSU is, if they stay healthy, they are going to be the team to watch in the West for the year. And I don't think you can forget about Ole Miss, but they're going to also have to prove it as well, kind of like Arkansas.
Why are y'all sleeping on Texas A&M though?
Yeah, Texas A&M's kind of interesting too. You kind of wonder about. I mean, they've got a great roster. They just have not performed, and you got a new offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, Petrino. So it's going to be kind of interesting coming out of the West. Okay, Robert. What about a surprise team in the SEC, either good or bad? Either a team that you think is going to do really good, they won't, or a team that you may be sleeping on that they're going to do good. Who would be your surprise team either way in the SEC?
My surprise team would be Florida, because I just think they're going to be Gator garbage. This is what it is. Shut up, Project Pat. But in all seriousness, I don't know about Tennessee. I have my reservations. I just think that defensively, I don't know if they're still there yet. Right, they're building depth and they're recruiting, but I'm just at this point I'm not sold on Joe Milton. I know you did what you did against Clemson, but let's be honest, Clemson's secondary wasn't scary last year either. So, I've got my reservations on Tennessee. I mean, there's a chance you could see them lose to Alabama. Right, a couple games could be lost before they get to play us in the later part of the season. A surprise team. Watch out for Vanderbilt. I'm feeling, for what it's worth, I think Vanderbilt might actually make a bowl game, and early in the season at that. I just think that Coach Lee is doing good things up there, and obviously, they played Tennessee to end the season last year, and it kept them out of a bowl game. Right, that's just crazy to think, considering what we expect out of Vanderbilt. So I think Vanderbilt will be interesting to see. I'd like to see them get a bowl game for once again. Yeah. But yeah, Florida. I'm sorry, Florida's going to be straight trash.
Okay, we'll see. And speaking of Vanderbilt, we do a little pick 'em thing too. Week to week. and I'm a sucker for Vanderbilt. I don't know why. I have no connection to Vanderbilt, but I love the underdog. I want the underdog to win, and so I would often pick Vanderbilt, and every now and then they would do what I wanted them to do. So that's kind of cool. Back in the day you played, back in the day, man, college football's changed since you were on the field. Division realignments, you got conference additions and teams going from one conference to the other. You have you have playoffs. You didn't have playoffs back in your day. Now you're going to have expanded playoffs. You have the NIL thing going on and the transfer portal. I'm wondering, what do you think about all of this that's going on in college football? And what's next? Is it in the long term, is it good for the sport, or are teams getting used to it? And what do you think might be the next big thing in college football?
Yeah, well, it's crazy because you talk about the transfer portal and people have different opinions on it. The only reason why I would be for it is because coaches have an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just hop to this next team. So why not give a player that followed that coach and signed with that coach to go play, with that coach? So if coaches should, do it, I think the players should be. However, are you married to that coach or are you married to that university? So when I signed my letter in Tampa, Georgia, be a Georgia Bulldog. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so no matter what, I didn't get on the field until my third year, playing wise, but I was a Georgia Bulldog through and through. And even though we lost our coach, Ray Goff, I was still a Georgia Bulldog. So I a lot of that is lost days and times because with social media, everybody wants to be that guy. Everybody's that guy in high school. Everybody's, they want to show here, these are my top 5. And then they go and expect to play right away. And they don't want to wait 2 or 3 years to get on the football field. And I think that kind of takes away a little bit. And then the NIL, I'm for players having a stipend and for them doing things. But sometimes this NIL deal where there are players that they kind of look down on their other teammates because their teammates are not making as much or doing as much. So it can kind of, be a double-edged sword when it actually comes to the NIL.
Yeah.
But as far as the next big thing, I mean, you're almost thinking it's almost going to be NFL. It's going to be like the NFL junior. And, a lot of these kids are going to be making millions of dollars in college. And then, of course, going to the NFL. So it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And, it all grew out of the pandemic. Really, that was the stimulus, when the pandemic hit. And we're still being affected by the pandemic. So, Cubby, back in the day when you play, I know you would have been much in demand. People would be looking for that long snapper to come into the portal. What do you think about all of this in college football that's come to pass in the past few years?
Yeah, I think that there are parts of the portal that are really, really good. They're very, very helpful. They allow guys a chance to go and play right away. I think it has begun to kind of self-regulate itself. I think more and more student athletes are realizing, and more coaches are doing this as well. Like, okay, like if you put your name in the portal, you don't have a place to come back. Like, we're not going to allow you to take your name back out and just come back after kind of shopping around. And then I think you see that there are a lot of people that put their name out there that never find another home to play. It's a lonely world out there all alone in the portal again for a majority of those athletes. As far as the expanded conferences, I'm personally really not a fan when it comes to those, especially considering the fact that we're about to expand the playoffs as well. We've talked about it. Kirby's mentioned it before, but who wants to see Georgia play Clemson and Oklahoma and Alabama just to maybe have to play Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama again later in the season? It just again, like Robert saying, it feels, or like Juan saying, it feels very NFL junior when you start doing it like that. Like you're talking about Alabama last year, win the games you're supposed to win, and you get rewarded by getting the playoffs and possibly win a national championship. Where we know, starting next year, you have the same year like they did. they're the 5 seed, and they're the highest ranked seed that doesn't receive a bye. I mean, that, seems like it kind of takes a little bit of the thrill and fun out of that Tennessee game. And, who cares that we lost by a point? We're still going to make it at some point. So, for me, the only positives I think about the expanded playoffs is the fact that you'll have playoff games on college campuses, and it'd be kind of cool to see Georgia travel to Penn State or Penn State travel to Athens, in early December to play a playoff game. So that's one of the positives of it. And, there's that dead period between the conference championship games and then the playoffs. You got that, a month of just kind of, you get the bowl games, but, a lot of those are lower tier bowl games. But, it is what it is. And it's all about the money. That. It's all about the green. And it's that's the way it's going to be. Robert, as we look forward to the coming season, what's on your mind? What do you think? What do you think about this coming season as far as Georgia is concerned, and just nationally? But who do you see? I know you're a big Georgia fan, but I don't know. What do you think about this season coming up? You ready to go?
I'm ready for a three-peat. But in all seriousness, too, when you look at Georgia having to replace offensive coordinator, quarterback, Georgia's not alone around the country. You look at the elite contenders. Alabama's same situation, Ohio State situation. It's very interesting because there's a lot of teams experiencing the same things, which kind of makes you feel this level of parity. Beneath us. I'm going to leave that there. But, I'm looking forward to seeing some, marquee matchups across different conferences. Like I've got my eyes on week 2, right? Going to watch Texas go to Tuscaloosa, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could make or break seasons for both of those teams. You got Georgia obviously on our way to the playoffs again. There's several teams like who's going to win the Pac-12. There's a bunch of these different questions that could be answered and asked, across the country. And I think it's just opening up for a kind of an intriguing year of college football.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, Juan, tell me your go-to tailgating menu. Well, when you get ready to tailgate, now what are we looking for? What are we going to have?
We're going to have ribs. We're going to have macaroni and cheese. We're going to have coleslaw. We're going to have some French bread. We're going to have sweet tea, and then we'll probably have some pound cake and some chocolate chip cookies.
What time supper?
Just got diabetes thinking about that.
Yeah, what time is supper at your house? Exactly. I'm coming to your house, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, all right, Kobe, give me your pregame rev up, get ready to go song. What do you put on to get ready to go?
And see, this is gonna be funny. It's just more of a routine for long snappers. I'm not having to rev up. I don't need to be too juiced.
Gotcha.
That's always a big thing. We like to pick on kickers. Rodrigo used to meditate in a corner for 30 minutes before the game alone. It's a lot more routine oriented than it is I'm about to go knock somebody's head off. But a big routine I had is I used to always like to go out, snap a couple, no shoulder pads on just to loosen up a little bit, and then come back in, start to slowly get dressed, walk around. Always used to like to see how far you could throw a football to really loosen up the shoulder. Can I make this 45-yard pass on a sideline to my fellow long snapper? But just nice and easy, and know that you've done it hundreds, thousands of times before, and luckily for me, really probably not going to need me to do it today.
Well, listen, I want to know, did you make the 45-yard pass? Did you do it?
I got a good arm.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. All right. Robert. Now give me your, I don't know. Give me your good luck charm. Before Georgia plays, you always do this certain thing the same way at the same time. It's your superstition. What is it? I know you got one. So
I do. You actually got to match the jersey for the home team or away team, right? Whether we're home or away, I got to match it, and I got to put it on roughly around 30 minutes before kickoff. I want to say 30 to anywhere between 20 and 30. If I do that right there, I feel confident in everything.
Okay.
If I don't, or I'm out, listen, if I know I'm not going to be home or whatever, I will put it on ahead of time just to make sure. But I have to have it on before 20 minutes before kickoff.
Do you have go-to socks on? Do you have go-to socks, or that doesn't matter?
No, just a jersey, and then you got to retire the ones that you wear when you win the national championship. So I got 2 retired jerseys as well.
I got you. I have a wonderful wife. I coach the team sitting in my recliner when I'm not at the stadium and not at the game. I'm constantly coaching from my recliner. And my wife will say, "Honey, they can't hear you." I say, I don't care. They need to do what I'm telling them to do. So, listen, how cooperative, one, is your wife with you when you watch UGA? Does she let you holler in the house?
Yes, she does. She actually does a little bit more hollering than I do. So, I kind of look at her like, do I know you? So she played volleyball at Georgia. So she is a diehard Georgia fan.
I got you. Yeah, my wife usually goes into the other room. She says, "I can't take this. You coaching, and I can't take it." So she goes in the other room. Well, listen, guys, from the DGD podcast, you guys are great, Robert and Kobe and Juan. Thank you for coming on our program today. We look forward to getting again with you guys and talking about UGA football. Anything we need to cover today that we haven't covered? What do you think, Robert? Anything we need to talk about before we go?
I think there's 53 days left until Georgia.
53 days?
53
really?
days. That's coming. It's counting down. No, other than that, I think, listen, it's a damn good time to be a Georgia Bulldog fan. I'll tell you that.
Yep. Hey, 3-peat, here we come. I like 3. I like the number 3. It's my favorite number. All right, guys. Thank you for coming on our program, and we'll have you back on soon, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you for having us.